Imagine a snake with legs, horns, and a whole bunch of sharp teeth. Imagine it with big wings and the ability to breathe fire, and you have a dragon. By saying the word dragon, we all imagine a similar beast, a big, strong, flying, carnivorous lizard. And if you think about it, that's really weird. A dragon is an entirely fictional animal, but we can still recognise them. We know what is and is not a dragon. That's not all. We know its habitat, we imagine its lair, it's in a cave, it's surrounded with lava, or it's generally in an area that we would consider hostile. Sometimes it has a hoard of treasure, and sometimes it has a princess. In both cases, the dragon's guarding something that the people desire. It's keeping it in a place where mankind cannot settle, in a place where mankind needs to travel to. Eventually, the dragon, as an enemy of the people, is killed, and its treasure is taken from it. If the dragon is imagined, it should appear throughout history in a variety of different stories, and in each of them it should play a different role. To a certain extent, this is the case. The Chinese dragon, or the Long, isn't an inherently hostile creature, having control over water, rainfall, typhoons and floods. The Chinese dragon is, however, the exception to a pattern that exists in the modern world, as every cultural heritage, from India to Britain, shares ideas about dragons. That dragons existed in Chinese mythology at all still shows that a powerful serpent exists throughout many cultures. Why? Why does it appear in so many places? If it is a creature of our imagination, why is its appearance so universal? And in so many cultures, why is its story so similar? First, where did the image of a dragon come from? One theory is that humans explain fossils of extinct animals that they have found as dragons. At the Royal Archcathedral Basilica of Saints Stanislaus and Wenceslaus on the Wawel Hill, or Wawel Cathedral in Krakow, Poland, there is an example of this. When King Krakus had killed the legendary dragon that lived in a cave near modern Krakow, he had founded the city, and the dragon bones were hung from the cathedral so that people would remember his deed. The idea that dragons only explain ancient fossils that were discovered is not accepted very widely. Fossils are very rare, so they wouldn't be found in large enough number to create a story with so many common features throughout the world. Though Wawel is an example of this being the case, it is more likely that the fossils supplemented a belief and a story that already existed. The nature of dragon stories and beliefs implies that there is a common feature that cannot be explained with fossils alone. For us to begin imagining a dragon with a snake's body is probably not an accident. The ancient Greek drakon could be translated as both dragon and snake, and many forms of dragons could, at their core, be considered snakes. The book, An Instinct for Dragons, hints at another theory, where it argues that this imaginary beast comes from a survival instinct, an innate fear that humans have of their three most deadly predators: snakes, large cats, and birds of prey. This perspective makes sense. For as long as humans have had language, we've liked to tell stories, and a popular story in all cultures is the hero overcoming terrifying enemies. Dragons, with the body of a snake, and the claws of a cat, and the ability to fly like a bird, would be the most terrifying and dangerous enemy to primeval man. When we consider Wawel Cathedral, it is easy to see that this belief could explain mammoth bones in an easily understandable and entertaining way, fusing it with the myth of King Krakus' founding of Krakow. Dragon stories come in three parts. 1. There is a dragon which plagues a people, which makes life impossible. 2. One individual, a man, or a god on man's side, rises to the task and attempts to kill the dragon. 3. The hero, through supernatural power, manages to kill the dragon, returning normality to the people. Various cultures have dragon stories which follow this formula. They imply a common heritage for all of the stories. In Indo-European myths, the killing of a serpent is by far the most important part of the story. By killing the serpent, normal life as the audience knows it has been enabled. Because of the magnitude of this deed, the story marks it with a special word which is unused in any context except for a supernatural killing. This word is the Indo-European Gwen, which means, simplistically, to strike, slay, or kill. But it denotes a larger struggle between good and evil. A normal man cannot Gwen another normal man. Only a hero or a dragon can Gwen. If the hero Gwens a beast, then life as the audience knows it has been made a possibility. Should a dragon Gwen an individual, then life would be made impossible. As English is an Indo-European language, we still have this word, and thanks to Latin influence on our language, we have two forms of it. Firstly, from Latin, we have the word fendo, meaning to hit or thrust, which has become the words offend and defend. Secondly, in Old English poetry, we have the word bonan, which became the modern word bane. The word has two meanings. a cause of great distress or annoyance, but it can also be something which causes death. As a result, a hero becomes the bane of a dragon. A hero is the dragon's bane. Breathing fire is a common feature of dragons, which is peculiar as it is certainly not borrowed from any animal. How can we explain this feature if it's so unusual and original? In Beowulf, the Old English heroic epic, we are shown a clear example of why dragons can breathe fire. The dragon lives in a lair where it's guarded its treasure for 300 years, when one day a slave breaks into the barrow and steals a cup while the dragon's sleeping. The dragon was enraged, and as a vengeance, whenever night came, it travelled to nearby towns and burnt them to the ground. When Beowulf hears this news, he is distraught. Because he was king of the Geats, it was his duty to protect his kingdom. So he gathered 12 of his strongest men, and he went to the dragon's lair. All of his men ran away in fear, and they left him to fight the dragon alone. While the dragon and Beowulf fought, they had both sustained damage, and the battle continued until, again, the king gathered his wits, drew a slaughter axe, bitter and battle sharp, that he wore on his plate mail. The king of the Geats cut through the dragon in the middle. That was the king's last victory by his own deed in this world, as his wound from the dragon was swollen, and he discovered inside him, welled with deadly evil, there lay poison. The dragon was killed, and the passage mentions that Beowulf becomes the bane of the dragon. To define this meaning of bane, you would have something poisonous which ultimately causes death. Beowulf becomes the bane of the dragon, but the dragon has also become the bane of Beowulf. While Beowulf had won the day, the cost was his own life. The dragon's fire, therefore, is a primal fear of our predators. With snakes, cats or birds, it isn't necessarily the initial bite that you have to take action against, but it's the venom or the infection that takes hold of you afterwards. It's the burning sensation that seems to kill you. The dragon's flame can be understood as a primal understanding of the burning sensation of infection or venom. This explains how such a bizarre idea, that a breathing fire, can be maintained in so many different dragon folklores throughout the world. In Christianity, there are two notable serpents, both at the beginning and at the end of the Bible. In the beginning, there is a snake that tempts Eve to eat the forbidden fruit, an act which takes man's naivety about sins from them. A notable feature of this snake is that, as punishment, God took away the snake's legs. Before this act, the snake, in the Garden of Eden, had legs. The second appearance, in Revelations, at the end of time, a dragon will be cast into a sea of fire by God before he brings about a new heaven and a new earth. The period of human existence is beset on two ends by serpents. At the beginning, the dragon-like snake dooms man to be mortal, but at the end, the dragon's death allows man to be immortal once more. The dragon, therefore, becomes closely associated with the evil of Satan, an idea which recurs throughout the Middle Ages, fusing with the ideas shown in Beowulf and other Indo-European dragon stories. By the High Middle Ages, stories about dragons were incredibly popular, and surviving examples show a fusion of Indo-European ideas with Christian ideas about the dragon. In St. George's story, the dragon lives in a lair near a kingdom and demands that every once in a while, the kingdom must provide the dragon with a person for it to eat. One day, the dragon demands the king's daughter. The king wishes to avoid it, and approaches his people, who responded that it was his duty to feed her to the dragon, just as they had done with their sons and daughters. St. George enters from stage left, and he agrees to kill the dragon, but only on the condition that the whole town agrees to convert to Christianity. Then, once he's managed to kill the dragon, they all convert and build a church. Here, we see a dragon that we would recognise. Now that we understand the dragon, we can see the layers of its history. There is the fact that it is a dragon, which reflects the primal fear of humanity's predators. The dragon story is Indo-European in origin, which we can see from its three-part nature, where the dragon threatens a way of life, and a hero rises to the occasion, who fights the dragon and allows normality, which here takes the form of conversion. Finally, there is an additional Christian layer. The time with the dragon is marked as not having Christianity. Following the dragon's death, though, the people immediately convert. This shows that the dragon alludes to paganism, and his death has allowed the people to successfully convert and become good, hearty Christian people. Dragons have a lot of history. They began life as a subconscious warning against our predators, which we then breathed life into, in the form of stories where a man who could slay a dragon must have been the most brave man that there ever was. They can breathe fire, as they were once believed to be poisonous creatures, warning that the worst thing about them is not necessarily the strike, but the burns that they can leave you with. This fact translates into their home as well. Their home is hard to reach, it's inhospitable for men, and it's as though they can thrive where we cannot. Overall, dragons give us a glimpse at our prehistory, a culmination of our fears which we know now does not exist, but it tells us more about how we used to think, giving us a closer look at our ancestors than we may have at first thought.